This marks the 9th part of this manhwa. If you haven't viewed the previous parts, you can access them by clicking the I button located above, or the link is provided in the description. Let's aim for 400 likes on today's video. To show your support, consider subscribing to the channel. Let's begin our recap video for today's manhwa.
The agreement to trade slaves for 300 gold each led to a shift in public anger from Aaron, who had trespassed, to the nobles who took the slaves from the citizens. The people protested vigorously, demanding the release of their slaves and calling the nobles to account. In response to the growing unrest, the nobles became nervous. In a meeting, one noble questioned why the citizens were demanding the release of the slaves. Another noble explained that Aaron was rumored to be buying the slaves at 300 gold each, leading to a perception that the nobles were being deceitful. A third noble dismissed the public's reaction as foolish because they were siding with the trespasser for a little gold. A noble in a dark blue outfit then intervened, stressing the urgency of the situation. He warned that conceding to the people's demands might prompt Aaron to retaliate, while refusing to release the slaves could lead to losing public support. Hearing that, the room fell silent, as the noble in the dark blue outfit warned of impending doom if the situation continued to escalate. Another noble, dressed in blue and yellow, asked for actionable solutions. The blue noble replied that he would address this, but first needed to discuss an important matter. Their spy had reported that Imperial forces were on their way to the kingdom. Although the Empire had officially refused to support them, they might still offer assistance. To secure their help, the nobles would need to make an offer 10 times larger than initially planned. Meanwhile, in a noble's bedroom, Arthur lay on the bed contemplating his situation. He marveled at the luxury of the room and imagined sharing it with his beloved. Despite his feelings, he doubted whether such a dream was feasible, given his status as a mere centurion compared to his beloved's greater strength. Arthur, considering his position and abilities, looked at the wig and outfit he used to impersonate Cainus and had a realization. He decided to focus on becoming a strategist instead of relying on physical strength. He thought that by becoming smarter, he could still achieve success and wealth without risking his life in battle. Meanwhile, in a storage room, Cainus, Aaron, Cheryl, and Rex discussed their plans. Cainus expressed concern that offering 300 gold per slave might negatively impact the economy. Aaron asked Rex to provide more details. Rex reported that out of 10,000 slaves, about 80% were owned by nobles and 20% by common citizens, meaning they might need around 60,000 gold, which he considered manageable. Cheryl raised a concern about the remaining 8,000 slaves not covered by the gold offer. Aaron replied that they would need to force the remaining owners to surrender their slaves, but he was unsure whether this would involve violence. With the Imperial army approaching, Aaron felt pressed for time and regretted not having a chance to persuade the remaining slave owners peacefully. As the meeting progressed, Rommel entered and reported that they were running out of the funds allocated for the people. He asked if he should tell them to wait longer. Upon seeing Rex, Rommel excitedly greeted him as his brother. Rex, however, rejected Rommel's recognition, pushing him away and declaring he had no brother before storming out, leaving Rommel shocked and hurt. Meanwhile, Cainus heard a noise outside and discovered a bird carrying a letter from the dwarf Keshi. After reading it, Cainus turned pale, thinking the news could not be worse. Aaron, noticing Cainus's distress, inquired about it. Cainus tried to downplay the situation, hiding the letter and suggesting Aaron should keep a low profile for now. Just then, Arthur burst into the room, announcing his achievement. He dragged in a person bound by ropes and wearing a black cape, drawing everyone's attention. After torturing the captive in the black cape, Aaron confirmed that the nobles in the castle had reached out to the nobles outside for help from the Emperor. Realizing that time was running out and the Imperial army would arrive before they could locate and deal with all the nobles, Aaron contemplated drastic measures, but dismissed them as impractical. An idea came to Aaron, and he began to laugh, unsettling everyone in the room. He instructed Rommel to organize the troops to prevent anyone from leaving the castle. Rommel complied. Aaron then directed Cheryl to inform the nobles inside that they could negotiate, but with a demand. They must pay 300 million gold to end the conflict and quell the riots. Cheryl was taken aback by an exorbitant amount, doubting they would agree to such terms. Aaron, however, was pleased with Cheryl's reaction, indicating that she was beginning to understand his strategic approach. Cheryl, frustrated by Aaron's demand, protested the possibility of having to act again. Aaron assured her that this time she only needed to inform the nobles they had 2 days to decide on the 300 million gold offer. Arthur saw an opportunity to prove himself as a strategist and asked if he could accompany Cheryl to manage the details and any difficult tasks. His request surprised both Aaron and Cheryl. Meanwhile, Canis, riding towards his nest, reflected on a letter from the dwarf Keshi, which reported that humans had trespassed into the nest. Canis cursed his situation, lamenting the timing of his magic being sealed, which prevented him from transforming into his true form. Recalling Lord Vivian's warning about the severe pain he would endure if he used magic, Canis decided to investigate the situation anyway. He steered his horse off the road into the forest, considering the paradox of not being able to cause himself pain if he couldn't use magic. Once deep in the forest, Canis attempted to revert to his true form. Initially, he felt no pain, but soon a violent, sharp force gripped his heart, causing him excruciating agony. His body thrashed uncontrollably, destroying the surroundings as he struggled to return to his previous state, overwhelmed by the unbearable pain. Cheryl and Arthur, as envoys from the Brahn territory, arrived at the inner castle gate to negotiate with the nobles. Cheryl noticed the heavy guard presence and thought that, while it was a strategic choice, they had underestimated her. She secretly summoned 2 spirits to discreetly monitor the guards. In the meeting room, the nobles reacted strongly to the demand for 300 million gold by sunrise. One noble questioned how they were supposed to raise such an amount, while another, bearded noble, criticized the absurdity of the demand. A silver-haired noble furiously pointed out that 300 million was the entire kingdom's yearly budget and demanded they leave if that was their only offer. Cheryl, observing the nobles' reactions, realized they would not agree to the 300 million gold. She was frustrated by their inability to grasp the gravity of their situation and thought that if it weren't for the negotiations, she would have resolved the matter more aggressively. Arthur addressed the nobles, suggesting that, since they seemed to value 300 million gold more than their lives, they should release half of the slaves they held captive as a demonstration of their priorities. He then upped the demand to 400 million gold, which only intensified the anger of the noble in the blue outfit. However, before he could respond, other nobles intervened to calm him. Later that night, nobles who had been heading towards a secret tunnel returned to the castle. They conveyed a message to all nobles of the Rumian kingdom. Duke Aaron had demanded 300 million gold as a condition for a truce. The nobles in the castle had agreed to these terms, rather than waiting for the Imperial army. They needed time to collect the funds and meet the demands. Nobles were instructed to enter the castle through the secret tunnel upon receiving the message, with a warning that ignoring this decree could result in being demoted to commoner status, as decided by the council. Rex reported to Aaron that all the nobles who had been heading for the secret tunnel had now entered the castle. Aaron then asked Rommel about the status of the nobles' houses, to which Rommel confirmed that they had thoroughly checked both the houses and all buildings within the castle walls. Satisfied, Aaron instructed Cheryl to leave. Cheryl, irritated, reminded him not to shout when she was close by. In the throne room, the nobles were in a heated debate about how to gather the 300 million gold. One noble complained about not having 10 million gold, while another suggested using funds from a shipwreck sale on the black market. The first noble claimed he could only provide 100,000 gold, which was met with disbelief and frustration from others who insisted that this money was crucial for their survival. Outside the throne room, knights overheard the argument. One knight questioned how long the nobles had been discussing the issue, and the other remarked on the rarity of such a gathering, even during the reign of the king. The first knight expressed skepticism about the nobles' ability to resolve their situation, noting that their discussions seemed unproductive and full of arguments. Their attention was then drawn to a fire spirit left by Cheryl, which confused the knights. Suddenly, the spirit shot fire at the roof, creating a portal through which Aaron emerged, leaving the knights astonished while Aaron smiled at them. Inside the throne room, the nobles were still quarreling about the gold. One threatened to kill another before Aaron had the chance, to which the other replied indifferently, saying he had no money anyway. Suddenly, a fireball blasted off to open the throne room door, and Aaron and Cheryl entered. Shocked, the noble in the blue outfit asked how Aaron had gained entry. Aaron smirked and reminded them of the 300 million gold demand, reiterating the deadline of sunrise. One noble protested that it was still dark and suggested waiting until sunrise. Aaron, realizing he might have been premature, laughed at the comment. Cheryl, flustered, quickly used a water spell to clear the dust cloud blocking the sunlight. As the dust settled, sunlight flooded into the room, leaving the nobles stunned. Aaron, observing that the sun had risen, feigned apology and asked if the negotiations were now over, as the enraged nobles charged at him with the intent to kill. He smiled and braced himself for the confrontation. Meanwhile, in the forest, Cainus, having successfully reverted to his true form, regained consciousness and attempted to fly back to his nest. Despite the initial success, he was struck by intense pain in his heart and fell to the ground. After a brief struggle, he managed to continue flying and crashed into his nest. Upon arriving, Cainus discovered numerous dead dwarf bodies scattered around. The dwarf Keshi, in tears, approached Cainus and asked why he had arrived so late. Cainus inquired about the cause of the destruction, and Keshi, still crying, revealed that the giants of the north were responsible. Cainus, enraged by the attack on his nest, resolved to take action. He instructed Keshi to gather information on the damage to his treasures, but then shifted focus, asking if any of her family were alive. When Keshi shook her head in sorrow, Cainus blamed himself for leaving the nest unguarded and regretted not marking his presence to deter intruders. Cainus offered Keshi vengeance for her family's deaths. Initially shocked, Keshi agreed, expressing her desire for revenge. Cainus, acknowledging her grief, observed enemy footprints leading south from his nest. He instructed Keshi to get on his back and began flying south toward the Brand territory, following the trail of the attackers. When Keshi asked about checking the nest, Cainus dismissed the concern, stating that even if something was taken, it was of no consequence to him. Keshi climbed onto Cainus's back, and together they flew south, tracking the enemy's trail. Aaron's negotiations with the Rumian kingdom's nobles played out as he had planned, allowing him to seize control of the kingdom without any bloodshed. Later, while seated on the throne, Aaron reviewed a letter from Emperor Zerone, which congratulated him on his victory and informed him that the empire would support his rule due to the Rumian kingdom's attempt to harm him, an Imperial family member. However, the letter also detailed that Aaron would need to cover an estate acquisition tax of 500 million gold and a yearly tax of 50 million gold within 2 weeks. Failure to meet these conditions would result in the Rumian kingdom coming under direct imperial rule. Aaron was taken aback by the exorbitant demands and questioned why the empire had deployed troops if their real intention was simply to facilitate his control. He wondered why the imperial forces hadn't crossed into Rumian's borders if they truly aimed to prevent his takeover. Aaron, realizing the true intent behind the imperial troops' deployment, began to laugh, recognizing that the empire had manipulated him. Their plan was to impose a steep estate acquisition tax if he succeeded in taking control and maintain ties with the Rumian kingdom if he failed. The troops had served to distract him from the financial demands, ensuring his focus was solely on the takeover. Determined to make the kingdom part of his territory, Aaron resolved to navigate the situation despite the empire's cunning strategy. 1 week later, Aaron, exhausted and resting his head on the table, lamented that, despite gathering all the nobles' wealth and property, he had only amassed 200 million gold. He turned to Cheryl for suggestions, but she had none. When Aaron asked Cheryl to repay some of the money she had borrowed, she angrily protested her lack of funds. Aaron advised her to stop buying things and wished Cainus were present to assist. Then Arthur interjected, suggesting they might negotiate with the empire to reduce the taxes or offer an alternative to gold. Cheryl dismissed the idea of negotiating with the empire, arguing that if such tactics would have worked, the empire would have granted them control without the exorbitant taxes. She questioned what alternative they could offer, suggesting that holy water or a dungeon wouldn't suffice, and remarked on Aaron's previous success in similar situations. Aaron considered her points and realized they needed to offer something unique. As he pondered this, Rex burst into the room with urgent news. Giants were reported approaching from the north of Brand Castle. Aaron was shocked, noting that giants from the frozen land would have to cross the Black Mountains to reach Brand Castle, a feat that should be impossible. He questioned whether the giants had breached the Barrier of Iron, a formidable fortress established by the first emperor to block giants from entering imperial lands. The Barrier of Iron, guarded by about 20% of the imperial troops, had not been breached in 50 years. Aaron was concerned about the possibility of Brand Castle being threatened and recognized that he couldn't ignore the potential danger. Inside the Rumian kingdom's inner castle, knights, including Arthur, were assembled. Arthur reflected on his current status as a centurion, despite Aaron's promise of organizing troops, and expressed a personal longing to see Bianca again. Rex then called the assembly to attention, announcing Aaron's arrival. As Aaron entered, everyone saluted him. Aaron bypassed formalities and stated that, due to the lack of a proper police force in the Brand territory, he planned to establish one. He introduced the new chief of police for this organization. Arthur, hoping the position might be offered to him, was stunned when Aaron announced that Bianca would be the new chief of police. Bianca, who had previously led a 500-man squad at Castle Blanche, was introduced with her significant experience. Arthur was awestruck, thinking of Bianca as his goddess. Bianca, now appointed as the chief of police, bowed to Aaron and expressed her readiness to accept his orders. Arthur, disheartened, realized he was not chosen for the position he had hoped for. He felt overshadowed by Bianca's advancement while he remained a centurion. Aaron then surprised Arthur by assigning him as Bianca's aide and temporary tactician for their forces. Although initially stunned, Arthur accepted the role, promising to do his best. Bianca, visibly flustered by Arthur's response, turned away, leaving him puzzled. Rex then reminded Aaron that they needed to proceed to the Barrier of Iron and arrive before sunset. Aaron instructed him to wait, indicating that he would join him shortly. To meet the Empire's demand for a 500 million gold estate acquisition tax, Aaron needed an additional 300 million gold. With limited options, he decided to offer his troops to the Empire as a solution. He planned to focus on the northeast of the Empire, specifically the Barrier of Iron, to halt the advancing giants from the north. Aaron intended to use orcs and other monsters to block the giants and offer protection of the area for a few years in exchange for 200 million gold, hoping the Empire would view this as a favorable deal. As Aaron was preparing to leave, Rex suddenly stopped and pointed toward the port, noticing smoke and suggesting an attack might be underway. At the port, Vice Captain Miller of the Blue Hammer Pirates was causing destruction. He was destroying warehouses and mocking the Rumian kingdom for becoming submissive to the Empire. Miller attempted to set fire to the ships as a final gesture, but his efforts were thwarted by the Miller captain, who deflected the burning wood. Vice Captain Miller questioned the need to spare the ships, noting that the Rumian kingdom had already surrendered to the Empire. Jacqueline, the Blue Hammer Pirates' captain, insisted on preserving the ships and expressed frustration at Miller's disregard for this instruction. Despite Jacqueline's orders, Miller, who saw no reason to follow the directive since the ships were not theirs, asked his captain for permission to continue his destruction. But Jacqueline was adamant about leaving the ships untouched. Another pirate informed them about the approaching Imperial forces, and Jacqueline urged Miller to stop causing havoc and leave with her immediately. Miller then came up with a plan to make their departure more entertaining, ordering the other pirates to raise the anchor and deciding to leave with her. When Aaron and his knights arrived at the port, they saw the pirates moving away and realized they were too late. Just as Aaron became flustered by the delay, Arthur pointed out that a cannonball had been fired from one of the ships. Miller, from the pirate ship, announced that the captain approved and then threatened the Imperial forces. As a cannonball from the pirates hurtled toward Aaron's group, Aaron dismounted and used his mental strength to slice the cannonball in half with his sword. Despite his effort, the two halves of the cannonball continued on their path, causing Aaron's knights to scatter to avoid the fragments. Aaron was puzzled by the cannonball's unusual behavior. Miller, observing from afar, noted the enemy's good fortune, while Aaron angrily instructed Rex to identify the pirates. Meanwhile, Crown Prince Philip, traveling in a carriage with Duke Gran, noticed a strange smell and quickly climbed to the top of the carriage. He instructed the coachman to speed up and not stop, concerned about the smell of blood and the missing escorts who were supposed to meet them. Nearby, the Giants of the North reported to their leader, Sven, that another carriage was approaching. As Crown Prince Philip detected the increasing smell of blood, Duke Gran peered out of the carriage and asked about the situation. Suddenly, he noticed objects flying toward him and quickly positioned himself and grabbed them, realizing they were blunt weapons used by monsters. At that moment, several blunt weapons were hurled at Philip, who skillfully deflected the incoming weapons with his sword, while Duke Gran tried to shield himself behind the carriage door. The coachman and horses were struck by the blunt weapons, causing the carriage to crash to the ground. As the carriage tumbled, Sven, a giant of the north, and his subordinate approached with pleased expressions. Sven noted that they got another one, indicating their successful ambush. Philip, crouching behind the wreckage of the carriage, recognized the attackers as the giants from the north due to their enormous size and the blunt weapons they wielded. He wondered how these giants managed to breach the barrier of iron, which had always been impenetrable. As Sven prepared to attack, Philip sensed a surge of bloodlust and quickly rolled away to avoid the strike. He regained his footing and glared at Sven. Sven, slightly startled by Philip's agility, chuckled and remarked, "That scared me." He and his subordinates laughed, with Sven adding, "I thought it was a rat. It was so small." Philip then observed the escort knights lying on the ground behind Sven, realizing they had already been eliminated. His attention shifted to Duke Gran, who was injured and lying in the wrecked carriage. In this intense confrontation, Sven, enraged, addressing Philip with hostility and demanding why he would dare to look away from him. Sven charges at Philip. Philip skillfully dodged the initial attack, leaving Sven perplexed as he had never been so easily evaded before. Sven swung his axe again, but Philip nimbly jumped back, taunting Sven by disparaging his heritage and implying that the North's giants, descendants of the warrior god Munin, were underwhelming. Sven, with a serious tone, was outraged at being mocked and at the disrespect shown towards a descendant of Munin, vowing to bring divine retribution upon the offender. In response, Philip asserted his authority as crown prince, declaring that he would be the one to administer judgment and punishment. Sven was taken aback by this revelation, questioning Philip's claim. Before Sven could respond further, Philip swiftly and decisively ended the fight, demonstrating his superior skill and authority. In the aftermath of Philip's battle with Sven, Sven's subordinates were left in shock. Philip approached them and declared that dishonoring the future emperor was punishable by death. He then swiftly and efficiently killed all of Sven's subordinates in a single fluid motion. As he finished, Philip noticed a black bird making a commotion before flying away, leading him to suspect that this bird was a spirit and that more northern giants might be nearby. He deduced that the barrier of iron, which presumably was a defensive measure, had fallen. Philip considered reporting this to the Empire, but decided against it, thinking there might be more effective ways to address the situation. Meanwhile, Aaron was preparing to leave the Rumian kingdom. He gave Rex the task of identifying the pirates and instructed Bianca to focus on port defenses. Both Rex and Bianca acknowledged their responsibilities. Arthur proposed that the situation with the pirates could be turned into an advantage for the Brand territory. He suggested that, since the territory lacked the funds to mobilize troops, they should use the pirate threat as a bargaining chip. By offering to send their own forces to address the pirate problem, they could potentially convince the Empire to lower their tax expenses. Aaron, initially confused, asked for further explanation, which Arthur provided. Aaron's reaction to Arthur's suggestion is initially serious, causing Arthur to feel uneasy. Arthur quickly tries to dismiss the concern, telling Aaron not to worry about it. Aaron, recognizing Arthur's astuteness, commends him for his cleverness and promises that if the plan succeeds, he will reward Arthur generously. He then gives a command for his knights to proceed to the barrier of iron, signaling their departure. As Aaron and his entourage set off, Arthur and Bianca say their goodbyes. Arthur is internally excited about the potential to get closer to his goddess, while Bianca feels overwhelmed by the competition to gain the Duke's favor. Bianca then notices Aaron returning with his knights, and upon closer inspection, she sees that Crown Prince Philip is among them. Meanwhile, in the forest, Sven's brother, who has been engaged in killing goblins, spots a bird and realizes it is the same one that belonged to Sven. Consumed by rage upon learning of his brother's death, he throws aside the dead goblin and demands to know who is responsible for his brother's murder, vowing to find and punish the culprit.
This marks the conclusion of the 9th part of this manhwa. To show your support for the channel and help speed up the release of recaps for your favorite manhwa, please consider subscribing to the channel. Looking forward to seeing you in the next video.